Affairs don't begin in the bedroom, they begin in childhood. In the part of you that decided she needed to bury her truth just to be loved. The part that's now screaming to be seen. I'm Alex Croxford, and this is the Deeper Love Podcast, where we name the shame, face the guilt, and help you find your way back to yourself. So let's begin. There's a very specific type of woman who cheats, and it's not who people think. What I see time and time again is the woman who cheats is the one that would identify as the good girl, the high achiever, the strong one, the one that everyone trusts, the one that everyone relies on, the one that puts everybody else first. And so when it happens, it doesn't just break the relationship, it breaks her identity. Because when you have spent your whole life thinking and identifying as the one that's going to get everything right, the one that likes to be perfect, the one that has morals and will always think about how other people feel more than she thinks about how she feels, you're not just dealing with the guilt. You're sitting there thinking, how the hell could I do this? This doesn't match who I am. And it leaves you feeling so confused, disorientated, like you look in the mirror and you think, who the hell is that staring back at me? That's not who I thought I was. You don't recognize yourself. And this is the part that no one is talking about. It's not just regret. It's not just shame. It's not just guilt. It's, I don't know who I am anymore. And that is devastating when you're already standing in the rubble of your own life, and that feeling of devastation and lostness because it's like you can't grasp on to who you are anymore is, well, it can feel absolutely terrifying, like you're free falling. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about character structure, which is something that a psychoanalyst named Wilhelm Reich came up with. He was initially trained under Sigmund Freud and then went on to become one of the pioneers of body-based therapy. But he very much talks about the fact that every single human in early life builds a mask. And this mask is a way that keeps us safe and loved. And depending on who our parents were, depending on how they behave, depending on what trauma we may have experienced growing up, we all form these masks to protect us. And in your case, that mask looks like the good girl, high achiever, who's low maintenance, probably, I don't need anything, I don't need anyone, I'm strong, hyper independent, successful probably at school or in careers. And this is a protector strategy. So this isn't about who you really are. This is more about how you learn to survive in the world. So as a child, when we're born into this world, we are born into a family that has its own set of rules, has its own set of conditioning, has its own set of opinions, beliefs, religious programming. And as you start to grow in that family, you learnt what was acceptable and what wasn't. So you started to learn what got you love and what got rejected. And to a child, and Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this a lot, We will choose acceptance and love by our caregivers over being authentic. Because as a child, without the support of parental figures or adults, we will literally die. We have to. We're the only mammal who needs parental support to get us fed, to get us changed, to help us move around straight off the bat. So, in order to keep that love and therefore keep your survival, you adapted. And you became easier, perhaps quieter, decided to maybe not use your voice, not speak your truth in some way, because that was dangerous. You'd get hit or you'd get shouted at. Or perhaps you became stronger. Perhaps, oftentimes it's the eldest sister. There is a very common pattern of the eldest sister being the one that is the protector of the family, has to be strong, has to grow up quick. There's not much space for the eldest sister's emotions. Perhaps you learned that your emotions weren't acceptable. You were sent to your room, or you were told to grow up if you were crying, or big girls don't cry, or go and turn off the waterworks. Or perhaps you had to become more capable. Perhaps you had to grow up really quickly. Or you started to learn that when you got good grades, you got more attention. People became more proud of you. You got more love if you were successful at sports. And slowly and surely, you lost access not only to your real needs, because you were always trying to please everybody else, but you also lost access to who you really were. And the mask works, right? To a degree, being a perfectionist, being the one that achieves, being the one that can be strong and steady and be there for everybody else, in many, many ways, it gets you approval. You've probably got success, perhaps even found stability in life, ticking all the things off the life list that we're told we need to do in the Western world in order to be success. Oh, you've got the career, you've got the house, you've got the husband. And that on the outside seems to satisfy many of society's expectations. It satisfies so many parts of us that feel like, okay, I've done this. I'm doing life well. But internally, it creates a huge amount of pressure, because now you have to keep achieving. You have to keep building on what you've already done. You can't stop. It also creates disconnection, because when you are the strong one, and when you are the perfect one, and when you are the one that everybody else leans on, the chances are you're also not vulnerable or talking to anybody about something that's gone wrong in your relationship, or talking about your affair, or talking about any emotion that you feel. There is a chance that you're not going to be doing that, because vulnerability to you equals weakness. But in that lack of vulnerability, in the lack of being able to share with somebody what's actually going on inside of you, even if what's going on inside of you is numbness, that creates disconnection. And on top of that, it can create a feeling of emotional flatness, almost flatlining, existing in a very narrow existence, not wanting to feel too much sadness or too much fear or too much rage, but at the same time, that blocks you from joy and bliss and excitement, and terrified of being too much. So I'll have to dampen myself and stay in the safe middle. But in that, this starts to create an experience of feeling unseen. Because really and truly, we're not letting anybody see us. If we won't be vulnerable, if we won't share what our internal experience is, if we're more caught up with being seen as perfect and high achieving, then we're never going to let somebody really see us. We're going to create this distance, this wall, an invisible wall. You're also going to feel like nobody can quite reach you. You might have loads of friends, You've got loads of friends and a partner. You know you are surrounded by people who love you, but it's almost like no one can touch your heart truly. And that leads to starting to feel slightly dead inside. Like something's missing, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is. And it's almost impossible to clock it, because this has been the place from which you are living your whole life. This has been your normal. This has been how it's always been. So how can you possibly see what's happening? And so even though the affair might have felt like it came out of nowhere, completely left field, completely threw you off, it was actually the moment that the mask cracked. And a part of you that had been silenced or unmet or suppressed for your whole life finally broke through. And this isn't a conscious process. There wasn't a part of you that was thinking in your conscious mind, it's time that I'm going to take off the mask, or it's time that I'm going to crack the mask. This didn't happen in your conscious mind. This wasn't some strategy. I mean, maybe for some of you, there was more of a strategic part of this, but the woman I'm speaking to right now, this didn't come from a strategic place where you wanted to blow up your life and you wanted to do the messiest thing you've ever done, which is terrifying for anyone that wears this mask. This came from deep inside of your nervous system, deep inside of your body mind. And that is separate from your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is the part of you that makes decisions, that thinks, you know what, I'm going to go downstairs and make a cup of tea. But the process of making a cup of tea, that comes from many, many years of knowing that you don't have to think about turning the kettle on and getting the mug out of the cupboard and getting the tea bag in. That's all happening that's all happening from your unconscious. And all that unconscious is stored in your body. And so when this part breaks through, it feels so confusing because it feels completely disconnected from who you actually are in your conscious mind. And the thing I want to be really clear about here is because oftentimes on social media, I get accused of taking away the accountability for women and saying that I'm basically giving women permission. I'm actually doing the opposite, because this doesn't remove responsibility. You are still responsible for what you did, even if it came from an unconscious part, even if it came from a part of you that broke through the mask. We must take accountability for our actions. That is the first step. But on the flip side of that, if you only sit in feeling guilt and shame and punishing yourself for what you've done, you will miss the actual root. And my belief is that this is the whole point. Nothing this big and this painful happens in our lives unless we need to wake up. And being stuck in the guilt and the shame and the self-punishment isn't going to help us grow or heal or evolve or mature or even come home to the woman that we were born to be. And the real pain in the aftermath of the affair is the woman you thought you were and the woman who did this don't match. And I get it that your instinct is to try and fix it or control it, or to be a better wife, to prove that you're good, to prove that you're going to read everything and listen to all the podcasts and try to understand it and be more there for your husband or your wife more than ever before. But that keeps you in the mask. And that good girl, strong one part, she is not the problem. She's not something we need to get rid of. In fact, she has been fantastic for so many reasons in your life. And she's acted as a protector. Her job was to keep you loved and keep you safe and to keep things together. But she blocks access to truth, to your truth. Because underneath that protector is a need. You have needs. It's okay to have needs. Humans have needs. We all do. Underneath that protector is emotion. Probably emotion you've never let yourself feel for fear of being seen as weak or unreliable. Underneath that protector is vulnerability, is being able to show someone the truth of what's happening inside of you. And underneath that protector is the truth of who you are. The part of you that wanted more, that felt disconnected, that needed something different. She never went anywhere. She didn't disappear. All she did is go underground. You know, I know that you're going to be listening to this episode thinking, wow, now I understand more. But you can understand all of this. And you can listen to every single one of my podcasts. You can watch every single one of my reels, read every one of my carousels. You can do all of that and still feel shame at 3 a.m. You can still feel lost. You can still feel confused. You can still feel like you're drowning. Because this isn't a thinking problem. This isn't a mind problem, which is where you understand. Your conscious mind is where you understand. This is a nervous system pattern. And how we heal this isn't through more analysis or more understanding or more control. It's actually through meeting the part of you underneath the protector, underneath the mask, and slowly but surely building the capacity for you to feel your emotions, reconnecting you to your truth, to who you really are, to the most authentic version of you, so that you can, either in the relationship that you're in or in further relationships, you can stay connected to yourself. You stop abandoning yourself for other people. You stop abandoning what you want or what you need to keep the peace and to keep everybody else happy. You finally get to be able to speak your truth, set boundaries without fear of being too much or that somebody's going to say no or reject you. And you can choose differently. You can choose partners that are going to be more aligned with who you really are, not through how you've been performing to be your entire life. And if you don't do this work, you either rebuild the same relationship with the same pattern, or you leave and recreate it with somebody else. Because the mask is still running the show. And I know this on a personal level. I lived this. I was the strong one, the high achiever. I was completely disconnected from my heart, from my emotions, from who I was, from what I wanted. I had created an entire life based on the blueprint that society had set out for me, because I thought that's what success looked like. And then I cheated. And that completely dissolved myself. That dissolved who I thought I was. I was lost, broken. I thought I was the worst person I'd ever met in my life. But now I know I don't feel any shame or any guilt anymore. And not because I didn't take responsibility. Trust me, I have taken so much responsibility for this. But I know that affair didn't define me. It was the wake-up call that exposed everything underneath. And now I am able to live a life that is so much more in alignment with who I am, with what I want. My relationship is just so beautiful. We still have difficult times. Does not mean that now there's no challenge. Challenge is always present. But what I can do is I now am able to face that challenge and grow. I don't get lost in it because it doesn't mean something about me, that I'm not perfect, that I can't do relationships perfectly. And life feels so much more beautiful. It feels magical. I feel alive because I'm connected to who I am. And if you're listening to this and you know this is new, if you're listening to this and know that this is you too, not just the affair, of course, but the pattern that has been running underneath it, this is exactly what I work with. And the Healed Heart is a 6-month container where we do this properly. This isn't about understanding it. We don't rehash the affair. This is about actually changing the pattern underneath what led you to have the affair in the first place. Because a woman who isn't living true to herself is going to start feeling dead inside. And when she feels dead inside, the first thing that makes her feel alive is going to be too difficult to resist. And so if you're ready for that, then I'm going to invite you to book a discovery call. The link is in the show notes. And on that discovery call, we're going to look at where you are and whether this is the right space for you. But if you are ready to shift the place in which you are standing right now, one that feels so confusing and dark, smothered with shame and guilt and confusion about what's happened, then in 6 months' time, things will look different if you commit to yourself in the Healed Heart. Thank you for listening to the Deeper Love podcast. If today's episode spoke to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're ready to go deeper, you'll find all the ways to work with me in the show notes. Until next time.